Hello everybody, we welcome you to this session on community participation in disaster management. As you all know that disasters are catastrophic events, and when they come, they just take away everything with them, and the most affected thing is the community, because community is the first responder to the disasters. Before the external help actually comes into picture, it is the community which has to see what needs to be done, how people need to be rescued, how medical aid can be provided, what kind of food storage do they have, how to treat to the victims, where to go for shelter. So these are little things which vary of course from disaster to disaster, but it is the community which is the first one to be affected and the first one to react, so it's called the first responder. So generally we normally talk about trained first responders like the police, the army and all, but they arrive at the disaster scene very late. So the community actually is the untrained first responder, and the idea is to train them in such a way that they participate in disaster management. So this is going to be the focus of our discussion today, how community can be enabled to face the disasters. We have with us Professor Uma Meduri from the Faculty of Public Administration, IGNOU, and Dr. S.M. Kulshresht, former Director, India Meteorological Department. They are our experts and they will also talk about the role and the relevance of community participation in disaster management. Now, before we actually start the discussion, we have to first see what exactly is a community. Normally, community is a very loosely used term. Any group of people can be called a community, and people tend to use it in that sense. But community is not each and every group of people. Community does have a sense of belonging. Community is about shared feelings, shared experiences, shared aspirations, shared environment. So when you talk about community, we are talking about a type of homogeneous group, not exactly homogeneous in every way in customs or lifestyles, but homogeneous in the sense that they've had past experience of disasters, and they are as vulnerable as each other. Some of them can be better off, but by and large, community have similar kind of requirements, and they have to be treated in that sense. So when you talk about community participation in disaster management, we have to be very clear about what exactly is the nature of community that we are targeting. The second thing is that what is exactly disaster management? Normally, disaster management is treated as a strategy, as a program, as a thing done by a government or an NGO or an international agency. But disaster management is not just a program. It is a goal, it is a mindset, it is a process. So community's participation in disaster management has to be seen in that view. And today we are going to specifically focus on community-based disaster management, because this is a concept that is coming up, because the idea is actually to make community effective and trained and prepared for disaster management. So we'll be focusing on all these issues. I'll be asking my experts also to later, focus on all these things. Now, before we actually start the discussion, I just want to say that there are many tools of community participation. It could be communication, education, training, then networking knowledge, sustainable livelihoods approach networking, participatory rural appraisal can be one of the techniques, then participatory learning and action approach can be one of the tools of community participation. Then the most important tool of community participation, as I said earlier, is the community-based disaster management, and this will be the focus of our discussion. And community also participates in many ways, like in the form of resident welfare associations, disaster task force, community action plans, community-based organizations. And now another thing, that community is not just community which is affected by disasters, it is also the NGOs that work with the community or for the community, the other bodies, the autonomous group, the self-help groups, they all work with the community to actually form the community. So our focus is not just on the group of people, the vulnerable people who are affected by disasters, but we also would extend the definition of the community to actually the agencies that are working for the community. So, and earlier we were following a very traditional kind of approach to disaster preparedness. We were treating community as beneficiaries, as victims, and all the external help came from outside agencies. But the approach is slowly changing, and now the community is one of the stakeholders, the participant in disaster management. I would like to ask Professor Uma Meduri about how this approach from traditional community participation is now changing to a very different kind of paradigmatic change.
Thank you, Alka. As Alka has rightly mentioned, now there is a lot of drastic change in the way we are managing the disasters, because the community now has become a focal point. Earlier it was that the entire approach towards managing disasters, the preparedness, rehabilitation, recovery aspects, all these things, it was very top down. The approach has been top down. Like in globally, like in many countries, it was a thing that any disaster or any crisis would occur, the people would look to the agency or the emergency agency, the responsibility of which is to provide the immediate relief and assistance. No doubt that still even now it is the major responsibility of the government, but still there is some change where I would like to point out, like earlier the thing was, it was always the victims or the people were portrayed as really helpless. Like that's why there was a lot of reliance or the dependence on the agency which is providing the relief. But now the emphasis is more and more of creating awareness and making the community realize that they have the ability and the capability to cope with the crisis. So now we are moving from the helplessness of the victims towards the awareness of their ability to cope. And other important trend is, earlier the reliance was mostly on international agencies and also on the national governments. But now the reliance on national governments is still there. We depend upon our national reliance, but still there is a community self-help that is given predominance. Like as we say that self-help is the best help. So that's why the entire thing is now weaving around this, that making the communities self-reliant. And it was earlier the emergency agency's responsibility to look into the rescue and the relief operations. As Alka was rightly saying, it is not just the community now, but the other actors like who might not be affected by the disaster, but other NGOs, other community-based organizations, self-help groups. In a way now it has become, or it is becoming, everyone's responsibility. And the other important trend, like we are moving from, earlier we used to look upon the community or the people or the receivers of aid. But now we look upon them or we take them into account as actors. Like, you know, they participate in their entire process of managing the disasters as actors in this. And also the tendency on the part of the agencies earlier was to give out a sort of a dole out in the form of, you know, whatever the assistance they give. But now the emphasis is more and more on empowering the community. It is not that the community is just dependent on the other outside agencies, but now the trend is to make them more and more self-reliant and then enable them realize their capacities and capabilities and then help them to face the wrath of the disasters. So now while the earlier trend was donor focused, now we can say that it is more and more people or the community focused. So now we can say that the entire change towards this paradigmatic change, we can say, is more and more bottom up. Like, you know, this is the alternative approach we are developing in this process of managing disasters, where now we are trying to build up everything from the community. Like, it's not that the national governments and the international agencies do not have a role, but they do have a role. But the thing is, first make the community realize make them aware of the dangers they are likely to face, and then make them, enable them to evolve their own strategies to face the disasters that they may face. So this, we can say, is the little paradigmatic change we observe in the case of managing the disasters.
I would also like to ask Dr. Kulshrestha, what exactly is this community-based disaster management, disaster preparedness?
Thank you, Professor Dhameja. As you yourself said very rightly, that disaster management is more a strategy. And keeping that in view, it is well recognized now that disaster management has two components, two major components. One is disaster relief, which so far everybody has been dealing with that. Once a disaster occurs, then every agency concerned, they rush and try to do their best. But the second, or shall I say the first component of the disaster management should be disaster preparedness. A well-known saying is there, "A stitch in time saves 9." So one has to be prepared, and preparedness is at every stage, right from community to even the national government. They have to be prepared, knowing what are the vulnerable places or what are the likely disasters that could occur. But as you said in the beginning, and Professor Uma Maduri strengthened that argument, that disaster preparedness at the community level is of paramount importance. As you rightly mentioned, they are the first responders. But apart from first responders, the time is of essence. When a disaster strikes, the aid and the assistance from the responsible agencies will come. But it will take time depending upon the place of occurrence, the intensity of the disaster and all that. So the time in that case is very essence, is of essence. And if somebody can deal with it, howsoever coarsely, that is only the community. And the third most important thing in community disaster preparedness, why it is important, is that the community should not panic. In spite of the disaster occurring, the people should be able to deal with the situation as best as they can till the external help arrives. So I think the importance of community-based disaster preparedness lies in this, that they are the first responders, they have to react first, and they have to take care of the situation till external help arrives, and in all this the time is of essence. So that is why it is of importance. But I would say that you mentioned that it's not going to be the same response everywhere, every community. Community is itself a term which can mean a mohalla, which can mean a village, which can mean a taluka, which can mean a district, or even a state, a small state. So depending upon the type of thing. So what is necessary is that for the community, that they should have some sort of a risk assessment of their area, the community. And this risk assessment can be put in a sort of equation form also, that is the risk of any community is a sum of the likely hazard and the vulnerability. That is, hazard is not in our hands, depending on whether it's flood, whether it's cyclone, the hazard is there. But then how vulnerable that community is, that will decide what is the risk faced by the community, for which the community has to be prepared, and that is what we call the community-based disaster preparedness. Now, vulnerability, in my opinion, can be number of things. That is how much prepared the community is, that is the weakness of the community, its location itself, whether it's by the side of a river, whether it is on a coast, whether it is in a seismic zone. So the location itself and all that. Then the lack of infrastructure, what infrastructure is required, but more than all that is the lack of awareness, lack of motivation. That has to be there. So the lack of confidence, what I mean to say, is there. So, and when I mentioned that word, that they should not panic, that means the lack of discipline or some sort of a community feeling, and then team spirit, that has to be there. Taking all this into account, a vulnerability assessment has to be made, and then depending upon what are the likely hazards, what type of hazards have occurred in the past, what were the intensity, what were their impacts, then a risk assessment has to be made. What I'm trying to say is that community-based disaster preparedness is not only an idea, but it has to be changed into concrete action points, depending upon the condition of the community and the likely hazards. So I think that, in my opinion, is the essence of CBDP, community-based disaster preparedness, and that is why the community has to be prepared to participate in the event of any disaster occurring there.
Mr. Kulshrestha, thank you very much. I mean, you've actually clarified the concept of community-based disaster preparedness. But my question is that can it be done some other way? Government must have failed, or NGOs and other kind of networking must have failed, that they narrowed it on community. Are there any instances which show that community has gained from this community-based disaster preparedness? And if they have they shown some kind of success stories? And if they haven't, then what are the problem areas actually in the way of community-based disaster preparedness?
Yes, a very important point you have raised, Professor Dhameja, that it's not that the government or the other agencies, the entire hierarchy, that they have failed and so they are trying to pass it on to the community and that, well, you manage it till we come. No, it's not like that. The agencies concerned, whether at the district level, whether at the state level or the national level or even international, they are always alert and they will do their best. But then it will take time to muster all that program and then come there with the required field personnel and the required equipment, and all that takes time. Till then, the community has to deal with it. And as I had said earlier, the most important thing is the community meanwhile should not panic, apart from whatever they do to help themselves. Self-help, as you rightly mentioned, that they should not panic. In that case, if they panic and they are in a demoralized state, then even the agencies which are coming from national or from state level or district level, they would not be able to do much. And that is why it is very essential that every community knows what are the risks it faces. And those risks, and then the younger people, now the education is spreading and everywhere, they have to come forward. This has to be managed. Now, what is to be done as a part of community-based disaster preparedness, again, is very specific. For example, now vulnerability assessment I had mentioned. Now finally, taking into account the likely hazards and the vulnerability of the community, community-specific action plans have to be prepared, which I like to call CAP, Community Action Plan. And these community action plans again cannot be an omnibus document. They have to be community-specific, that is place-specific, and also culture-specific. See, ours is a vast country with a pluralistic society. So each place, there has to be something, the type of food that we eat or type of reaction that we may present to any situation. So these plans have to be very specific, place-specific, community-specific. And they should take into account, say for example, the weaknesses of the community or strengths of the community. Both are very important. And they should also take into account what are the likely infrastructure available nearby. What are the local organizations available? Is there a school in the area? Is the school a double-story building? Whether it is a shelter is available in case it is a coastal area of cyclones. So all those things, plus is there a temple available where there is a high ground available for anybody to take shelter? Are there shelters available? Is there a Mahila Samaj or Sangeet Samaj or some drama group or somebody else? There are teams available for some other thing which can be very easily motivated to take into account this. As I have said, first thing is create awareness. Second thing is create motivation. And third thing is there has to be demonstration. After simply saying that you get aware about this and you get motivated will not do. So that is where the role of the government agencies, and more than government agencies, the NGOs comes in. And fortunately for us, now there are so many NGO groups working in this and working in the remote areas. And so community action plans, specific community action plans are very essential in my opinion.
Thank you, Professor Kulshreshtha. I would just like to ask Professor Meduri whether there have actually been any success story which has used community-based disaster preparedness and has come out with a good comprehensive community action plan.
Well, to begin with, like as Professor Kulshreshtha was mentioning, and as you had also mentioned, like now even I think at the government level also there has been a realization, or there are increasing efforts to incorporate this community-based disaster preparedness and community participation in the entire activity of managing disasters. Like as an illustration, I would like to say that the Government of India had initiated a project with UNDP in about 17 states in the country, and in one of the states, that is Assam, there the villagers had felt that they have this perennial problem of heavy rains and floods. So what they had decided is to tackle with this. With the help of the Gram Sabha in the village, they had formed a raised structure and also a fishing pond, and the Gram Sabha had provided the necessary machines and the boats and all for this, and that pond is also used for fishing. So the villagers were really involved in this activity, and that was a beginning of this entire initiative. And also in this this particular village, the people were involved in drawing up community resource maps and also forming these community teams and disaster task forces. And another thing I would like to mention in Gujarat, where in some of the villages they have this problem of acute drought. What they had done was the government had initiated Build Your Own Dam scheme, where with the involvement of the Panchayati Raj institutions, the government had provided some amount, about 60% of the entire the budgetary amount, and the rest 40 was pooled in by the Panchayati Raj institutions, and the community also had put in their labor, and this also helped in the construction of some of the check dams. And the other example I would like to give, which had been even reported by the World Disasters Report, is in the state of Andhra Pradesh, in Medak district, which is drought prone, there is a village Zahirabad. There an NGO, Deccan Development Society, that really had worked with the people. What it had done was that entire area had problems of this acute shortage of rainfall, and earlier the excessive reliance of the people was on this rice, wheat and cotton. But later they realized that they really were facing problems in cultivating this. What this NGO had done was they experimented with the people in growing some locally grown varieties, and in the process they really came up with a number of initiatives. Like to begin with, they had targeted women, and then they encouraged them to form self-help groups, women self-help groups, and also they tried to work with people in identifying some locally grown grains, and also some of which had really become redundant. What they tried to do is they tried to create even a community gene bank, like seed gene bank. And also the other thing which they tried to do was, whatever produce was grown, they tried to sell it to the people in the village, in that village itself, at really subsidized rates, so that people could buy what they have, like those people who could not grow could buy what has been grown in the village itself. So this activity led to this thing of local production and also sale, and also they really had experimented with all these initiatives of self-help groups and growing a gene bank and all these things. So that really has been appreciated by many organizations at the international level also. And but the thing is, we have really success stories at various places, but what I would like to say is, wherever these things happen, the community initially becomes very, very active, and then, but the thing is, the NGO or the Panchayati Raj institutions or the government agency, whichsoever is working with the community, it should try to empower them, like at the same time try to build their skills and the capabilities. Like in this context, I would just like to give an example of how this Swaminathan Foundation, MSSF, is doing a lot of work in the coastal areas of Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. Like they have set up, they have really used this information technology in empowering the people. Like they have, with the help of the local people, they have created this village knowledge centers, which is fully equipped, and it is managed by the people themselves in the village, and the fishermen can go and then take the necessary information before they go to the sea. And recently, about 6 months ago, what they introduced a scheme called as Mobile Fisher Friend Scheme, where they tried to give some mobile sets with, of course, with the help of some of the IT companies like Tata Teleservices and other things. They tried to give these mobile sets to the fishermen, that before they go onto the sea, like they get the information, and suppose there is some turbulence or any such thing on the sea, these people, the village knowledge centers, are able to have a sort of a contact with them based on the information that they have last received from the fishermen. So I can say that really in India also a lot of things are being done, but the real question that remains is, like, are we in the process, are we able to sustain these efforts? The question is sustainability of these efforts, and also these organizations, whether they are able to, once they are away from the scene, whether the community is able to manage it.
Thank you, Professor Meduri. I think you've made very, very important observations. And I think about Pondicherry, I had also read that in the post-tsunami phase, these knowledge information centers really came in handy, and lots of lives were saved because they got the information much before the information actually reached the villages in Pondicherry. And all these knowledge centers are connected to the internet, and some of the village people only man it, and they give the information information to the illiterate farmers. And another thing is that SEWA is also doing a lot of work in the area of microfinance, and many other organizations like Caritas India is also doing it with other NGOs, and Duryog Nivaran is doing a lot of work in community building, and plus we have our panchayats which are now gearing up to work in the area of community building and participation. So the thing is that, as you rightly said, that the problem is that nobody's weaving these success stories. There are success stories, at least, you can say many, 100 to 200 in each state could be, or maybe we do not even have the figures. But these are not getting woven, these are not getting published, people are not getting aware of these stories. And this World Trade Organization 1999 had given this concept of twinning of communities, where it had clearly laid down that what one community benefits out of any disaster management program or community participation program, the other community can always benefit, barring some changes, like Professor Kulshrestha also said, changes can be culture specific and place specific. So these changes and the contexts are taken into view. One community success stories can easily pass on to other communities, but this is actually a big problem because it is not happening. And Dr. Kulshrestha mentioned that the problems as well as the good points of community-based disaster preparedness are awareness, motivation and demonstration. So I would just like to ask him whether it is at the awareness level that the problem lies, or the motivation level, or the demonstration level. Actually, where does the real problem lie, besides all the points that we have discussed about sustainability of these success stories and the problems of lack of education and vulnerability?
Thank you, Professor Alka. In my opinion, the problem lies not in these success stories, but success stories are there, but seeing the size of the country and the population, they are too few. So we have to realize and we have to admit that CBDP, that is the community-based disaster preparedness, is a concept which has proved itself, but it cannot be developed overnight. It cannot be developed overnight. It will require a systematic, and as rightly mentioned by both Professor Uma and yourself, that not only a systematic but a sustained effort. Now that is something where the government agencies and the NGOs do come in. But in any case, the crux of the problem is that how much the community rises to the occasion. And for that, in my opinion, the basic point is that creating the awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness that in a disaster, when it comes to that area, the community, or whatever we like to call it, every individual in the community has a stake, a personal stake as well as a collective stake. It is not that the flood will come and it will not affect me or it will affect me. It will affect everybody. We do not know who will be the victim depending upon the circumstances the person is in. So that is where the first realization has to be, that every person every individual in the community has a personal and collective stake in dealing with the disaster, that is in subscribing to the idea of CBDP, the community-based disaster preparedness, and doing whatever is possible for it. What is possible for it, the NGOs are the best agencies who can tell them. That is, create awareness, create motivation, and more than that, give a demonstration to them. But the NGOs also cannot become a crutch to the community. They cannot always be doing. Today, the community looks to government, state government or central government. Tomorrow, they should not look to the NGO only that NGO will come. The NGOs have to empower, as rightly mentioned by Professor Uma, they have to empower the community, but then move on. Maybe come back and visit once or twice and then do it. That is why it is very essential that a high degree of preparedness is what is required. It is the high degree of preparedness that holds the key to the whole idea of trying to deal with a sudden disaster that may come with a warning or may not come with a warning at all. So I think for this the communities need, as I have said twice earlier, and I'm not at all hesitant to repeat it, because the three things that the communities need are sensitization, motivation and demonstration. And for sensitization and motivation, the communities have to use their inner strength, motivate their youth, motivate their educated persons, and demonstration they have to depend on the NGO. And that is why the need to drill in the minds of everyone that each individual in the community has a personal and collective stake.
And here I would just like to add to what Dr. Kulshrestha is saying, that when he's talking about, like he was mentioning about the vulnerabilities of the community, the other thing that one more important aspect relating to it is not just the, the physical vulnerability or the educational vulnerabilities the community faces. We need to take into account the, the cultural vulnerabilities, like in the sense that each community has, its own beliefs, customs, whatever it is. And certain things, when we talk about this managing the disasters, it is not just we give them the needed resources, equipment, or the physical structures and other things. Along with it, like whatever the community feels, like each community has its own belief system, we can say. Like but there have been studies which indicate that in some of the states in India, the people residing in the villages, by looking at the color of the clouds or a direction in which the wind is blowing, they are able to say, or they are able to slightly, we cannot say predict or anything, but they are able to gauge that some such problem is going to come. So we need to take these things also into
Local
account.
wisdom.
Local wisdom, we call it traditional wisdom. Like there was a news item that when this tsunami and other things had taken place, before that the fishermen in the coastal areas of the Tamil Nadu, they had seen some red colored fish, they call it red bait or something, fish with some red colored tails, and that actually understand the Central Marine Fisheries Department or the organization later said that the coming up of the fish, or the appearing of this fish on the surface of the water, it indicates that there is some water which is likely to come up, like the waves are really. So these fishermen had noticed this, and later it was brought to the notice of the organization, and then they in a way they made the people or the fishermen aware that in future when some such thing comes up, they should immediately come and then bring it to the notice of the organization. So there's I'm just quoting a small instance. The other thing is when this tsunami had taken place, in some of the villages of the Chidambaram Taluk in the state of Tamil Nadu, they had on an experimental thing trained the villagers in first aid, and then also how to rescue themselves when any flood or anything takes place. So I think last year there was a flood alert in this thing, though it did not come up, but immediately the community teams there, it seemed they had sprung into action, and they tried to tell the people about the likely danger that they are going to face, and then how they have to evacuate themselves and things like that. So when we talk about this community-based preparedness, like as Professor Dr. Kulshrestha was mentioning, like he was talking about the community-based disaster preparedness plan, the plan should, I feel that it should be at different stages. Like basically there should be three major stages. That community-based disaster preparedness, what it should be before the disaster, that is a pre-disaster, what the community should do. Like for example, when the community forms a plan relating to the pre-disaster phase, it should first indicate what are all the resources that the community has, like in terms of the equipment they have, in terms of everything, the primary health center, education, what are the buildings they have, and then the status of the Panchayati Raj institutions, how many, all these things. So there should be a clear profile of the village, and also the resource and the demographic profile of the village also. This should form part of the community-based preparedness plan when it relates to the pre-disaster phase. So next, when we come to the during disaster phase, the plan should clearly indicate the search, rescue and relief operations, and then the various routes the people should take, and where they are going to be housed, and the immediate help and the first aid and the medical aid which is going to be given to them, and also the food and the other things that are going to be given. And especially the plan should reflect at least the special needs of the people, like especially when we talk of children, old, aged, and then women, and then physically challenged. Like ideally speaking, these things should form part of the community-based plan when we talk about the during disaster phase. The next comes the post-disaster. Like the post-disaster, the plan should indicate the damage assessment, how it is going to take place, the immediate damage assessment, and also the damage assessment after the event. Like, that should be more detailed in nature. And later should come the important aspect of the rehabilitation, how the rehabilitation is going to take place. And when we talk of rehabilitation, it is not just the economic rehabilitation, that is also more important. Along with it, like we should talk about the social and the psychological rehabilitation also. Like especially when we talk of disasters, the psychological aspects, generally these are not taken into account. We know that people really undergo a lot of trauma when they lose their near and dear ones, and when they see the danger before their eyes, and people being washed away and things like that, it is really difficult. So the most important aspect is, along with the economic and other social rehabilitation, bring the psychological rehabilitation also into it, and for this the government also should provide the necessary support. So I just wanted to mention that this community-based disaster preparedness plan, like it should be when the government or the NGO or the community-based organization is working with the community and it is evolving its community-based disaster preparedness plan, it is better that they have it phase-wise and then incorporate all these things into it, and then this, when done with the community, that really will be of a great help. And in this context, I would just like to mention that a very small beginning was made by the university, by IGNOU, in the year 2002, where the Faculty of Public Administration had worked in 5 states in India. Then we had taken about 100 villages each on an experimental basis in states of Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh and Orissa, and effort was made to prepare a community-based disaster preparedness plan, incorporating all these things I was mentioning. Like, and it was a success in the sense that there was a lot of enthusiasm on the part of the community, and efforts were made to have, disaster task forces for various activities. And I'm sure, like even the Government of India, like as I was mentioning before, it has also initiated such work in many states in India along with UNDP, and they are working on this, like evolving the disaster preparedness plans, community resource maps and all these things, and involving the community and the Panchayati Raj institutions and all other community based organizations and NGOs working in the area.
Thank you, Uma. As you mentioned, we did this project from the Faculty of Public Administration, and if you remember that the first query that used to come to us was that, are you from the government? Because the community did not want to interact with the government officials or any international agency. So once they were very happy that we were from an educational institution, they were ready to cooperate. So I think the community also has its problems about interacting with various kinds of agencies. So they have all kinds of constraints, and as you mentioned, the psychological rehabilitation of the community is a very important part. And what we have not discussed so much in this session is that the importance of disaster task force, because that is something which comes from the community, that has members from community, people living nearby, somebody from the Gram Panchayat, somebody from medicine profession, a lawyer, an elderly person, and these are the people who are drawn from the community, and they actually know about the community vulnerabilities and the constraints, and then these people are the ones who should be actually encouraged to formulate the community action plan, of course with the help of other professional bodies, government bodies or self-help groups or NGOs, but it has to be the community. So the task should be to actually impress upon the community the very need to have a community action plan, and also tell them that if they go on as per the community action plan, they can actually sustain it for a very long time, and it will also help them in dealing with disasters. And of course, like Professor Uma mentioned, this community action plan has to go stage by stage. It has to be a pre-disaster plan, during disaster plan, post-disaster disaster plan. Now, another thing I would like to say is that sometimes community has a very fatalistic attitude towards disasters. I mean, they are too lazy to do anything. They also think that disasters are nothing but wrath of nature and God, and they sometimes don't even want to do anything. And for instance, you see, if you ask anybody, even in the urban areas, they would just wouldn't know where to run when an earthquake occurs. They don't know what to do in a mall when a fire takes place. Actually, there's always so much of panic whenever even a little bit of mishap takes place anywhere, whether in a rural area or urban area. So it's very easy to say that, you know, there should not be any panic, or we should have proper panic management. The moment there is something, you know, there is a stampede, there is panic, Upar tragedy, we all know how it happened. So many lives could have been saved, but panic spoilt it all. So it is also the human psychology of reacting to disasters which has to be kept in mind. So constant psychological counseling, in fact psychological counseling, as Zuma mentioned, is a very, very important aspect of community preparedness, because if they are psychologically prepared to face disasters, then they will not even panic. So apart from vulnerability assessment, infrastructure, development and other things, we should also work on the minds of the community, and a disaster task force which is from the community can play a very important role in this area. Now you see, everywhere you go, you see all those pots lying on the balconies, though they know very well that, you know, a little bit of shake and they all fall on the heads of the people passing by. But people are so insensitive, they don't even follow little things. So I think it's one stupendous task to actually make community feel that they are in threat of disasters. They are the ones who actually can deal with disasters, and they have to change their attitude to disasters. And this, like we've discussed in this session, self-help is the best help. Now I would just like to, Dr. Kulshrestha, to just add on to these points and, you know, give his observations.
Thank you. I mean, you have very rightly said, and just to put it a little more succinctly, what is necessary is the civic sense. I mean, you mentioned that very good example of pots on the parapet wall. By your example, another thing which should be very clear to our listeners is that when we say community-based disaster preparedness or refer to community, it doesn't mean the community means village. We very often use that word. It is urban, it is semi-urban, it is village, it is a remote, everywhere, wherever there are persons there. So it is really the common sense and civic sense which will help. So if the community doesn't panic, is prepared, knows what is likely to come and deal with it. Professor Uma Maduri had given that very good example where a drill was done and but the disaster didn't occur. Well, nothing was lost in my opinion. That was a training that is required. After all, fire drill is there. I mean, that is there. So it is just to assess the capability, assess the preparedness, assess the alertness that is there. That raises the question of early warnings. Professor Uma Maduri had mentioned the traditional wisdom and the what they call the local wisdom, or whatever you might like to call it. Yes, early warning, because even before the information comes. But a little more than the traditional wisdom. They can also, all communities now with the television almost in every nook and corner of the country, the national radio everywhere in the nook and corner of the country, and the mobile phone. I mean, the communication is really, I mean, last few years has seen not a sea change, I would say an ocean change, or whatever we may like to call it. So certain early warnings can be there. Just to give example of the most frequent disasters like cyclones, floods, earthquakes or droughts. Now cyclones, these occur only in coastal areas, and definitely cyclone is a process which takes a few days. It generates over the sea and travels towards the coast. And the national agencies, they put on the news channels, it is there. So I think all communities, they should be looking for the news in the cyclone vulnerable areas, and that would make their preparedness work or their drill to start a bit early. In case of say floods, it is necessary that for their areas they should consider the antecedent conditions, whether there has been rain during the past week or not. And then the rain, it's not only the amount of rain but the persistence that is of importance. Similarly, drought, whether it has been a dry season, for example in the North India there have been no rains in the winter almost, and if the summer continues like this, so one can have some sort of a early warning system which will help the community to be prepared.
Thank you, Dr. Kulshrestha and Professor Uma Meduri. I think you've given us very informative insights into community participation for disaster management. And we now all know that it is not a very difficult thing to prepare the community to face the disasters. A specialized one though, but if we work on it, community can be attitudinally prepared to make themselves enabled to face disasters. They should be made to realize that self-help actually is the best help. We have to work at various levels: awareness levels, sensitization levels, motivation levels and demonstration levels. It is specialized in the sense it takes into consideration vulnerability assessment, risk analysis, and also need to sustain them systematically. So there have been success stories and we need to look at them and weave them, and if we make sincere efforts through networking of the community, the disaster task force that is drawn from the community, the NGOs, the other groups that are working in disaster management area, and the government, we can easily solve the problem. And like Dr. Kulshrestha also said, it is not something that can be achieved overnight. It is a long drawn process, but it is a process. So is disaster management. Both should be treated as a long drawn processes and not one-time strategies. They are goals, they are mindsets, they are something that will take us a long time to achieve. I would like to thank Dr. Kulshrestha and Professor Uma Meduri for coming and giving their very, very critical observations on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
कोलकाता, कलिकाता या कलकत्ता, आप इसे कुछ भी नाम दें, इसके नाम मात्र से एक ऐसे नगर की छवि जहन में उभरती है जिसका एक समृद्ध इतिहास है। 3 शताब्दी पहले कोलकाता एक छोटा सा गांव होता था, जो इस कालावधि में भारत के सबसे बड़े शहरों में से एक बन गया है। कोलकाता का पुराना नाम कलिकाता था, जो उन 3 गांवों में से एक था जिन्हें जॉब चारनाक ने ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी के कारोबार के लिए चुना था। कोलकाता सन 1911 तक भारत की राजधानी रहा। तब भारत पर अंग्रेजों का शासन था। कोलकाता में ढेर सी ऐसी इमारतों और स्मारकों को देख कोई हैरानी नहीं होती जो आज भी औपनिवेशिक काल की यादें ताजा कर देते हैं। ऐसा ही एक स्थान है विक्टोरिया मेमोरियल। ब्रिटिश हुकूमत के दौरान भारत के वायसरॉय लॉर्ड कर्जन ने क्वीन विक्टोरिया को श्रद्धांजलि देने के लिए विक्टोरिया मेमोरियल बनवाया था। चार जनवरी 1906 को किंग जॉर्ज पंचम ने इसकी नींव रखी थी। वे उस समय प्रिंस ऑफ वेल्स थे। 28 दिसंबर 1921 को किंग एडवर्ड अष्टम ने इस पूरी इमारत को क्वीन को समर्पित कर दिया। मेमोरियल को देखकर इटालवी और यूनानी शिल्प के प्रति अंग्रेजों का झुकाव स्पष्ट नजर आता है। इसके गुंबद इस्लामी शैली के हैं। विक्टोरिया मेमोरियल को बनाने में जिस संगमरमर का इस्तेमाल किया गया है, उसका कुछ हिस्सा राजस्थान स्थित मकराना की उन्हीं खानों से आया है जहां से ताजमहल के लिए संगमरमर आया था। गुंबद के ऊपर 16 फुट लंबी कांसे की बनी स्टैचू ऑफ विक्ट्री को बॉल बेयरिंग की मदद से लगाया गया है। जब तेज हवा चलती है तो ये घूमती है। गार्डन ऑफ मेमोरियल को 338 गुना 228 वर्ग फुट क्षेत्र में बनाया गया है। उत्तरी दरवाजे की तरफ जाते हुए क्वीन विक्टोरिया की कांसे की बनी प्रतिमा नजर आती है। क्वीन अपने सिंहासन पर बैठी हैं। दक्षिण दिशा से इस इमारत की ओर बढ़ते हुए किंग एडवर्ड सप्तम की कांसे की बनी प्रतिमा है। विक्टोरिया मेमोरियल में भारत में बनी ऑयल पेंटिंग्स का शानदार संग्रह मौजूद है। इन चित्रों को 1770 से 1835 के बीच यूरोप के कुछ बेहद प्रख्यात कलाकारों ने बनाया। कोलकाता शहर के आरंभिक काल को थॉमस डैनियल की पेंटिंग्स में देखा जा सकता है। कलकत्ता गैलरी में खास तौर पर इस शहर के इतिहास और विकास को दर्शाया गया है और इसे अवश्य देखना चाहिए। विक्टोरिया से चलते हैं अब राइटर्स बिल्डिंग की तरफ, जिसमें फिलहाल पश्चिम बंगाल सरकार का सचिवालय है। ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी के जूनियर राइटर या क्लर्क यहां रहा करते थे। यहां क्योंकि लेखक रहते थे, इसलिए इसका नाम राइटर्स बिल्डिंग पड़ गया। राइटर्स बिल्डिंग का निर्माण 1780 में हुआ था, लेकिन इसके भव्य कोरिंथियन अग्रभाग का निर्माण 1889 में ही हुआ। इसके लंबे लंबे स्तंभ, मेहराबदार गलियारे और इसके मध्य में स्थित पवेलियन इस इमारत को गोथिक शिल्प कला का बेजोड़ नमूना बनाती हैं। यहां 4 मूर्तियां मौजूद हैं जो प्रतीक रूप में विज्ञान, खेती, वाणिज्य तथा न्याय को दर्शाती हैं। जिस जगह आज राइटर्स बिल्डिंग मौजूद है, वहां से कभी औपनिवेशिक गतिविधियों का संचालन हुआ करता था। यहां आसपास ही हाई कोर्ट, गवर्नर हाउस और प्रसिद्ध तालाब लाल दिघी मौजूद है। विक्टोरिया मेमोरियल वास्तव में कलकत्ता की एक खास पहचान है।
Gwalior Fort is a pearl in the necklace of the castles of Hind. This is the remark that Babur made about the Gwalior Fort. And right he did. Dutch tourist James Daniel also said something similar about this fort. Both Babur and James Daniel were right in their explanation. This fort is the most dominating feature of Gwalior's skyline. The Gwalior Fort spreads out over an area of 3 square kilometers and is surrounded by a solid wall of sandstone. This fort encloses 3 temples, 6 palaces and a number of water tanks.